On today's show, my good friend Glen Willis of ATL on 29 is back for a two-part deep dive into Dyson Daniels. We'll get into all of what he does very well, where he can improve this season, and much more. And it's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2056 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Tuesday evening into Wednesday. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, if you're a new customer with FanDuel, bet just $5. And if your first bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now today and check it out. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out, subscribe to the show, tell your friends, and we appreciate you being here. As always, today, I'll be joined by Glen Willis of ATL 29 for part one of a two-part episode. In fact, part two will be available as soon as part one is finished, so please stay tuned in this same podcast feed for the second part of this conversation. As a note, this was recorded a little bit ago and before the Hawks traded Kobe Buffkin on Monday. So keep that in mind for any references there. That was recorded previous to that move. And as I referenced yesterday, this is my plan to run this episode yesterday before the Buffkin news actually broke, but I had to put it on hold for 24 hours. But alas, plenty more to get to on the podcast. But if you missed it all summer long, we've been running these player capsules with Glenn joining me to discuss almost the entire roster. After this, there's only a couple more guys left, but a very intriguing discussion coming up right now. Part one with Glen Willis. Here we go. I'm joined once again by my good friend Glen Willis. It's time, Glen, for another player capsule. How are you as the calendar flips to September, a new month that we're getting closer? Later in September, Media Day happens. Like, we're almost there, really.
Yeah. It's it does feel like it's kind of getting close to us. And, as always happens on Saturdays, my three brothers were watching the Georgia football game and texting, and I pretend like I'm watching, just chime in a thought here and there. So football season's here, fantasy football season's here, but more important, it's like 7 weeks or so away from the start of the regular season. So, it'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, as we're recording this, we're like 4 weeks or so from Media Day, which is Media Day is only a media thing, but that's also the start of training camp, which is the same thing as when Media Day happens. They talk to the media and then they go to camp. So we're there, and only a few of these traditional player capsules left. If anybody listened to the previous ones, you can ignore this part. But if you are new to the podcast, we've already talked about guys like Onyeka Okongwu, Mo Gay, Beat Krejci, the two-way guys. Like, it's been a busy summer of player capsules, and I appreciate Glenn doing all of these, but more to come, of course. Still holding the big guns out, Reese Shea, Jalen, Trey. We'll get those guys later. But Dyson Daniels is really interesting. That goes without saying, I think, at this point. Had his breakout season. It was year 3 for him, year 1 for him with the Hawks. But as I am keen to remind people, he's still only 22 years old and won't be 23 until March. So it's basically still going to be his age 22 season in year 4. He's still a prospect in some ways. Obviously, he's arrived now, but a guy who is still on the positive side of the aging curve, getting better. And everyone knows this probably, but he literally won the NBA Most Improved Player Award last season. He finished runner-up in the Defensive Player of the Year. He's extension eligible, which we'll talk about at the end of this conversation. I'm intentionally not going to do a ton of that with you, Glenn, because it's not what we're here for, but it's a factor with Dyson. And broadly speaking, we'll get into the offense, defense, and everything, but how are you feeling about Dyson Daniels after year 3 and heading into year 4?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like for Hawks fans, and maybe in a different way for those that cover the team, he was probably the most fun part of last season. Just watching a guy get his first time a chance on offense to play on the ball quite a lot. We'll talk about some ups and downs there, what he did well. We'll talk about how he needs to expand his offensive game, continue to do that. But on defense, savant is the word that comes to mind for me. He's just brilliant on defense, knows how to make an impact, has great feel, sees everything, knows when to kind of pounce on an opportunity to kind of create a deflection or steal or whatever it might be. And today, in prep of this episode, I was trying to think, like, was this the best Hawks trade? And was there a better Hawks trade in the last 10 years, 15 years? It was hard for me to come up with one because this is to get him and draft picks. in exchange for, and there were other, peripheral pieces too, right? The ghost of Mr. Zeller that didn't play.
And Larry Nance.
Larry was huge last year.
He helped him.
They missed him after he got hurt. He was huge last year. And then the draft pick that turned into what it turned into, and this, was meaningful too. So, a win-win, all around. And I do think he's on, one of the 2 or 3 best defensive players in the league. And to your point, age-wise, I think there's still some room for him to learn how to even kind of grow his impact. It's as good as he is. It's hard for him to think about really growing it, but there's maturity that's still a possibility there. There's, they're going to play defense probably a little differently this season with their personnel. So that'll be interesting to see how he continues to make the same impact with possibly some schematic changes and things like that. But I mean, just like get your popcorn and watch Dyson Daniels play defense. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I wasn't thinking about talking about the trade, but it's probably good to at least bring up because it's been 14 months or whatever it's been since the trade happened, and I think you and I liked it more than a lot of people did. I know I praised the trade quite a bit when it happened. Part of that was that I liked Dyson more than people seemed to like Dyson. He was almost forgotten in New Orleans, like to the point where I have to remind people sometimes, like he was the 8th pick in the draft. This is not like some unsung guy. Like he was always he was a big time prospect who was a clear lottery pick 3 years ago now. That was 2 years ago after when the trade actually happened. But yeah, I mean, it could not have possibly gone better. The only recent trade I might bring up, and I say might for a reason, if that Pelicans pick turns into a top 3 pick in the coming draft, that would be that would rival it. But we're not there yet. That's still a very big if. That could be the 15th pick, and I won't be terribly surprised. But yeah, I mean, there've been some great free agent signings. I think about Paul Millsap, DeMar Carroll, Barker, but like trades, you'd have a hard time finding one that's gone better than the Dyson trade, because I think if you polled the league right now and said, would you rather have Dyson or DeJounte, everyone would take Dyson, and then you throw in 2 first-round picks of Larry Nance Jr. It's a pretty fantastic bit of business from hey, Landry Fields gets credit for that one. Good job, Landry.
Yeah. And I'm trying going off memory here, so correct me if I'm wrong. That was the same draft Jalen Williams is in, right? Same draft as all those guys. I kept going back and forth. It's like Jalen Williams was Santa Clara, really, not broadly known, but showed a lot of growth that last year. I don't remember if it was a sophomore year. I think a junior year. I think he was a junior this last year in college. And then Dyson, watching all the, Australian League basketball and then some G League and some things like that. I kept going back and forth on the two on which ones do I like the best. Dyson's offensive game was really rough at that point. Mm-hmm. But he's always had the reputation for being a really hard worker. And we saw some fruit from that, even offensively this last season. But to me, to put a guy in the backcourt with Trey, an elite defender that you can play next to Trey, I think is the way you'd want to kind of swing that construction if you can, especially if you're able to get enough offense from Jalen Johnson and if Ricochet grows and Onyeka's growth and adding Porzingis to shooting and stuff like that. I think there was a lot of pressure on Dyson to be the backup point guard essentially all season last season. I talked along of how I think the reps were very constructive and very helpful. I don't know that that's what their plan is going to be this year. But I think if you're going to put a guy next to Trey, you want an elite defender with length and smarts and feel and processing and all that stuff. And that's what they now have next to Trey. And I think that helps a lot.
Today's just brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most about 5-Hour Energy is how portable and convenient it is. Big taste, tiny shot. You take it anywhere and get that boost that you actually need when you need it. I always reach for my favorite flavor personally is watermelon because it's always refreshing. It's been a quick lift no matter where I am in my day. But at the same time, I've been eyeing the strawberry banana flavor as well. And there are a ton of different flavor options for you. It sounds perfect for me to try next time I'm trying a 5-Hour Energy. And I also love how fast it kicks in and that it's sugar-free. So it gives me the juice that I want and that I need with no worries about actually crashing later on. Enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots right now. Get the favorites that you love or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com. That is 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. So we'll do roughly what we generally do on these, but if you're a new listener, we'll kind of deep dive into both sides of the ball. Not totally in a silo, because basketball is not in a silo. You have to change ends; it all matters. But as far as like being constructive as breaking these guys down, the defensive side of the floor is obviously his better side of the court. We'll do that first, but I think you and I were talking before we started recording. It's almost less interesting, and that's because it's a credit to Dyson, because he's just obviously so good defensively. There is stuff to talk about. But offense actually might take longer, which might seem counterintuitive. But with us, and you and I probably value defense more than everybody else in the world does, technically speaking. But Dyson was just so preposterously good in his first season. I have a list of accolades here, Glenn. Should I just read them now to make it easier, of all the stuff that Dyson did last season?
Yeah. Another data point though. My favorite WNBA player is Gabby Williams, and when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh God, that makes perfect sense." She's an awesome defender.
That actually does make perfect sense. I actually didn't know that. I learned that right now, Glenn. That makes perfect sense. As I am not a WNBA expert, but I've been watching more and more, and that definitely aligns with what you're.
I feel like there should be some like orchestra music going or something like that.
Yeah,
it's like a magical thing.
I normally wouldn't do this. It's not the best radio, but it really is just good to realize just how many preposterous things Dyson did last year. So it's not in order, but he finished second defensive player of the year as a guard. That's impressive. Number one, he was first team all defense, 91 first place votes. So pretty much a lock to be that. The first player to average 3 steals per game since 1991. That was Alvin Robertson. I was alive, Glenn, but I don't remember that happening. You do, I'm sure. He set the new Hawks franchise record for steals with 229. Was the most steals by any player in the NBA since 1996. So you're talking about 30, 35 years ago, some of these things. It was the largest gap between number 1 and number 2 in steals in the history of the NBA. He had the biggest gap ever between number 1 and number 2 in steals. He led the league in deflections by an amount that's like difficult to describe. Basically, he had more than 100 more deflections in a season than anybody that they've ever tracked. Now, obviously, that's a relatively new stat, but still, it was a outpacing that was crazy. He was the first player since Scottie Pippen in 95 with 200 steals and 50 blocks. He led the league in total steals plus blocks, the stocks category, led the league as a guard. That's preposterous because he was the first guard to have that moniker, number 1 in stocks, since a guy named Michael Jordan in 1987-88.
He's pretty good.
Again, he's pretty good. And last thing, this is again not in order. He's only the 5th player in Hawks franchise history to make first team all defense, and the first one since Dikembe Mutombo in 1998. So that's honestly an abridged list. I had a longer one that would have taken even longer. But hopefully, if you watched him, if you didn't watch him, I know we probably have some Australian listeners on this podcast who are tuning in for Dyson. It was ridiculous. You cannot basically have a better defensive season as a guard. It's almost not possible. Now, the only thing that you could say, if you wanted to, and I'm sure I've actually seen it, I'm sure you have to, dating back to last season, like, well, why weren't the Hawks better defensively if he's so good? Well, because he's a guard is the long and short of it. Like, you can only do so much. You can't. And by the way, they were better defensively than they've been in a handful of years. But I say all that. It was crazy. I could keep going. It's bad radio, but Glenn, it was just a ridiculous season from Dyson, top to bottom.
It was. And because I'm ancient, I can throw another data point at you on the stills. The way stills were awarded in the 80s and into the early 90s were different than they are today, right? Mm-hmm. So today you'll watch a game, and if a guy gets into a shooting motion, even if the ball never gets above his hips or above his abdomen, it's a block. In the 80s and 90s, that was a steal, right? So they somewhere around the mid 90s or so, they switched the way that they were scoring that play, and so there's basically impossible for a person playing today to really kind of have as many block or steals as they had before because they were just scored very differently. So that's something to note there. And they're like, man, Glenn, you're old enough to really. I'm like, yes, I was in 1991 when I watched Alvin Robertson play. I was 2 years out of high school, so that was very much into my conscious young adulthood, semi-conscious young adulthood, we'll call it. And so it's just the scoring is very different now. But yeah, I mean, what other superlatives can you kind of throw out? You can go through adjective after adjective after adjective, and it all fits and applies. He's he's a savant, and I'm looking forward to watching him play another season and to see how he is with a stronger defensive cast around, playing next to Nico Alexander-Walker, other additions that they have on the roster, a healthy Jalen Johnson, hopefully, knock on wood, they're kind of, with the weak side rim protection and stuff like that, because basically for a lot of last season, he was the only serious point of attack defender they had playing in the rotation, start to finish. And it'll be nice to see him, like I said, with other guys who can do that. I think we talked about with Ricochet before. I think he's going to grow in that area coming to this season, but he won't be number 2. He'll probably like number 3 with Nico Alexander-Walker there. But even still, with all that pressure, he was so consistently excellent. And that to me says a lot about what we know about him behind the scenes. You hear talk too is that he's so mentally tough. And he's so competitive that he can deal with basically anything you ask him to do. That's what he showed us last year.
Yeah, it's interesting, again, like pointing out how young he is. I do that for multiple reasons, but this is a 22-year-old guy who carries himself like a 10-year veteran. He just does. Like Quinn would say that, and what Quinn is effusive about Dyson in a way that he's not about every player, for example. So are the assistant coaches. Like, it's the makeup. And, part of this is, it's interesting to kind of evaluate him because it was his first season in which he was like really a full-time guy. Like in New Orleans, he was in the rotation, but he wasn't always playing huge minutes. Like he basically doubled his minutes, his career high minutes last year. He played almost 2,600 minutes. Like that's a lot of minutes, a lot of games. He was durable, but to keep up the level of play that he did all year long while having that kind of jump in minutes, he's in great shape. That shows on the floor. And shape, also, that's of course physical shape, but mental shape as well. Like to be able to do reps and all those things like over and over again. It's not something you can just take lightly. It's a really big lift. And you're right to throw in that context that, I have said, and I know we talked about this even during the season, they were better defensively for a number of reasons last year. But he really was the only guy you would describe on the whole roster. Maybe you would say Clint, but Clint was obviously fading by last season. We all understand that. Who was like a genuinely like plus defender. Like they have a lot of guys on the team last year who were good or reasonably good defenders. A lot of guys got better. I thought Trey was better. Ricochet for a rookie did a really nice job. Jalen when he was playing, Okongwu got better, all those things. But like none of those guys, Larry Nance, who we talked about, is not a great defender at this point in time. The bench guys, like Mo Gay at the end of the year, maybe you throw in that category because Mo was playing awesome, but he didn't play until February? Like for most of the season, it was really Dyson as the only superlative defender carrying that massive workload. And look, having to play with Trey a lot is a difficult task on defense. We can be real about that. It is. So throw that all in a stew. I want to ask you about a couple different things, but I think it is important to put out there, like just the workload that he carried is not one that a lot of guys carry defensively. It was a tough ask for him because it was, in addition to being all the playmaking chops that he has, which we all know about, he was also the number one defender matchup wise every single night. Unless it was a guy who was a power forward or bigger, it was Dyson. Whether it was a point guard, shooting guard, small forward, he was the guy on the number one guy every single night of the season. And then to do that and then also have all those steals numbers and those block numbers, it's like most guys can't do both of those things. Like most guys can't be a really, really high level on-ball defender, ISO defender, primary guy, and then also create havoc off the ball. And he managed to do both those things.
Yeah, he did. And the other thing I love about him, where he kind of is transparent. Like I remember after the game where he could do nothing with Cade Cunningham. Cade got everything he wanted. And after the game, he wasn't the type to go, "Oh, the refs weren't letting me play physical." Or he's like, "I couldn't do anything with him." And I've got to go back and watch this and learn and kind of figure out a different plan for that. And I just have so much respect for a player that's just like, man, I did not get the job done at all. I couldn't do anything. And he's a handful on a very, very short list of best defenders in the league. And he just said verbatim, I couldn't do anything with him, and for me, that just generates so much respect for me that he just says, that's what happened. That is absolutely what happened. And that was an outlier for sure. There were only a handful of games where maybe his impact wasn't quite the same. That's the one that I think jumps out to everyone right there. But I love his roundedness and him just kind of calling it what it was and saying what happened and not shying away from it and taking ownership of it. That's something coaches love, organizations love. You can build on guys who have that mindset of like, I have to do better. And I love that about him.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer right now. If you are a new customer, you bet just $5. If your first bet wins, you get $300. Yeah, $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel Sportsbook app. FanDuel is great in so many ways, and one reason is it actually fits the however you like to bet on sports, whether it's the player props, the over-unders, the straight bets, the money lines, same-game parlays, future bets, or even live betting as the action unfolds. It's all there for you at FanDuel, and they make every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite teams or keeping an eye on your fantasy players or props, etc. They have every sport you can think of as well across the board, from the NFL, college football. Of course, they have the NBA, which we talk about all the time on this podcast. Plus, they have baseball, they have hockey, golf, they have tennis, they have soccer, both foreign and domestic. They have auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so many different more sports available every day at FanDuel. It's quick at FanDuel as well. It's easy to fast to pay out when you win, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So the question is, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now at visit FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet and get $300 in bonus bets when you do that. Check it all out at FanDuel Sportsbook and FanDuel app right now today. Just to make sure we're staying true to our sicko nature, I have some questions to ask you about Dyson's defense.
All right.
A lot of his isolation numbers, like some of the more advanced, synergy, some of those level, basketball index has these numbers, were all really, really good, like excellent ISO numbers. Some of his screen navigation numbers were not quite as friendly. And I wonder if that is on tape to you, having watched him all season long. And you watch basketball a little bit different than I do. We always talk about that. The contrast is part of why these work, I think. But what do you make of that part of his game as a screen navigator? Because he can't be perfect at everything. But that by some of the more advanced numbers, that was not, I won't call it a weakness, but maybe not like the uber strength that other things were last year.
Yeah. So for me, what jumped out to me last year, I think the number one part of that is that the officials were officiating screens differently last year. Right. So a couple of things. One is, in previous years, they weren't allowing a push on the screen. They were letting guys push. So let's say if Dyson's on, a guard, say Donovan Mitchell or whatever, and they're trying to force a switch onto Trey or Niang when he was playing with them, or Terrence Mann or whatever. Last year, centers, bigs that were setting screens were allowed to get a lot more engaged, hands-on, physically, and things like that. And the Hawks had guys like Niang and like Trey sometimes who have a hard time avoiding that forced switch, right? And so they were able to and Dyson's strong, but he's still kind of a narrow body, and all of that sort of stuff. And so other teams' bigs would walk him off of that ball handler and force someone else to come defend him. So I think the whole league's got to adjust to. It was a very, very different form of kind of fishing the screens. I think the whole league's kind of have to figure out, okay, how do we handle that better, right? And the Hawks are going to have to figure out, when that's happening, what are some techniques you can use to keep Dyson on the primary ball handler like we want to. And so for me, a lot of it goes down to, one, Hawks having several defenders on the floor, whether you want to talk about Garrison Matthews or Georges Niang or Trey and on, like, can't avoid that switch. And I mean, Trey worked as hard as he could. He's a little guy, so it's hard for him to be fit, to physically kind of push back and kind of have physical leverage and things like that. But I think the Hawks just did a pretty bad job of dealing with the way that screens were officiated differently and could not avoid those forced switches. And I think that shows up in his numbers. And it'll be interesting to see if those screens are officiated the same way this next year.
Yeah, I meant to say this earlier, I think, and I didn't. Dyson manages to have all those crazy steal numbers and those selection numbers while also being a low foul player, which is like extremely hard to do. Like you would guess a guy as aggressive as he is, and he goes for a lot of steals. You kind of have to go for a lot of steals to get as many as he does. Yeah. He averaged 3.2 fouls per 100 possessions last year. That's a crazy, crazy good number for a guy who's averaging 3 steals per game, and even more than that per 100 possessions. Like, he was averaging significantly more steals per possession than fouls. And that's like really hard to do, like, just as a general rule. Like, no one does that. You don't average more steals than fouls. So the fact that he's able to, I definitely hear what you're saying, and that shows up on tape. It just reminded me to point out that he's able to defend without fouling. And that's a Quinn staple. I'm sure you've heard and seen audio of stuff that I've shared where Quinn will always talk about defending without fouling. And Dyson's able to do that while still being a havoc creator. And that's difficult to do. One thing I want to add as well about Dyson's, this is not pure defense, but it matters because you have to close possessions. Dyson's a very good rebounder, like a very good rebounder for a guard primarily. Now, he is bigger than most guards. That definitely helps. But he's an active rebounder. He will high point the ball. And that's something a lot of guards don't do. Like, a lot of guards are just they get the ones that come, like, that bounce to them and they want to start the fast break maybe. Dyson is an active, like, he will help you in a proactive way on the glass. Do you see that as well? Because I think it's a small value add, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, and you and I talked about before how NBA coaches are like rebounding swings so many games, and it really does. It really does. And then Dyson's just his just commitment to playing hard on every possession and doing everything he can to help his team shows up in that area as well. And the other part of that's useful, he has a great hit-ahead passer. As soon as he gets the rebound, if he's in space, he's looking ahead for anybody who's, broken free, gotten ahead, just like Jalen does that a lot, as well. Trey's as good as anybody, Trey and Luka, and Jokic are, cream of the crop kind of in that area probably. But he's the processing is there as a rebounder as well, turning defense to offense quickly and trying to take advantage of a defensive team that's trying to get organized in transition. That all comes together, and he generates a lot of value there as well. I agree.
And one more thing, we will not do this. Like, it's not going to be this is not going to be the Nickeil Alexander-Walker player capsule, but I have on my notes to bring this up, like the matchup versatility. I alluded to it earlier, but being the number one guy on so many different kinds of players last year, I wonder, and it's so early, we just don't know what Quinn's going to do, and that's the reality. Like, some of this is just projection. I wonder if they might be suited to, when Dyson and Nickeil play together, which they're going to play some together, they might stagger them to a certain degree where you might want to have one of them on the court at all times to have that kind of high-level number one defender on the court. But, like, are there certain – you've seen Nickeil play a lot as someone who's close to the Wolves in that situation, and we had our mutual friend Dave Moore came on the show talking about Nickeil. Is there a scenario – is there a type of player where it's like, hey, why don't we put Nickeil on this guy and have Dyson be more of a roamer? Or is it still, even when they're playing together, would Dyson still be like the auto number one guy? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, no. So it's a fascinating question because there's a couple of things. One is Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a little smaller than Dyson, a little bit, right? Still very strong, great screen navigation, all that sort of stuff. But he has some of the same challenges. Like, it was good screen navigators took a big step back last year. Like, I don't want to go back through it again, but because the efficiency was just very different. For me, Dyson has a lot more impact off ball. He can impact on the ball and off the ball. Dyson jumps passing lanes. Dyson has great feel. I put out a video to my Patreon today on his game versus the Celtics, and that helped the Hawks qualify for the in-season tournament. And one example of the play I saw was Jalen Johnson was trying to contain Jaylen Brown sort of on the left mid post, and Dyson started coming from the top side as a second defender, and Jalen needed to contain Jaylen Brown so that he was pushing him towards that help. And now Jaylen Brown is incredibly strong with the basketball. He gets where he wants to go. So I'm not being too nitpicky on Jalen, but it's just one of those things where it's like, to maximize Dyson's value and utility, to have other people steer the ball handler towards that kind of help, that impactful help that he has. And so that's an example for me, is where there might be times where you're like, well, first of all, we're playing our third game in 5 nights, and Dyson's been going 36 minutes because we've had close games. And it might be nice if you're playing, a bottom third kind of tier team, to say, hey, Nickeil, we're going to play 30 minutes tonight. Let Dyson play off ball some, give him a little bit of break, those sorts of stuff. But Nickeil is very, very impactful on ball. He's also very smart off ball, but he's just not quite as big. And Dyson has, just his feel for jumping passing lanes and creating deflections. So there can be situations where they're on the floor together where it's like, we don't have to have Dyson at the point of attack all 34 minutes he's on the floor tonight. That's a luxury with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And it also depends on how much of a step Zachary Ricochet takes in that area too, to have other games where you can kind of, not plan so much of that for Dyson. Now, when you're playing the best guards in the league, then Dyson's going to load up and take those minutes. I was remembering you talking about fouling. There's a Knicks game early in the season where Brunson couldn't do anything with Dyson. No shock, right, at all. And the second game, Brunson went out basically trying to foul Dyson. He's like, I'm just gonna try to get him 3 fouls and get him on the bench. And he had some success doing it, and it did impact the game. And Dyson even talked about that after the game, like, I can't be giving fouls away like that, So for me, I do think there's going to be other opportunities to manage Dyson's workload to keep him a little bit fresher. And he probably say, I don't need it. I'll take whatever assignment you give me. I'll take whatever workload you want to give me. But I do think to kind of have him fresh all the way through those other defenders, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, certainly reliable at point of attack. And I'm eager to see where Ricochet's growth is in that area as well, because that will impact an opportunity to do different things with Dyson defensively that might be helpful.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all scenarios, and we don't have time to go through them all. But there are some lineups that could be defensively terrifying with this team. I mean, you take Trey off the court and go with some of these. If your backcourt is Dyson and Nickeil, that's quite a foundation of a defensive backcourt. If you wanted to throw that out there with Zach and Jalen or whoever you wanted to go with, there are ways for it to be pretty scary if they want it to be, at the end of games, or if you're trying to, defend one possession and you can throw these lip lobs out there where there's just nowhere to go. Yeah. There's nowhere to attack. And Dyson's, of course, the lead guy in that.
And that's something they didn't have last year. Like in the games, Trey would often be on the court, right? And no, Trey, as small as he is, he still works hard to do the right thing and kind of make those plays. But you'd have Georges Niang sometimes on the court, or Terrence Mann sometimes on the court for that. I mean, and the concept nowadays, if you have the person that will do it, is less than, say, 8 seconds on the clock. You are switching 1 through 5 everything and trying to make it impossible for the other team to even run their freaking play, right? You got Ricochet, Dyson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen, and Yeka. You can switch 1 through 5 with that group easily, no sweat at all. And that's not, they didn't have anything close to that last year. If you want to switch 1 through 4, we're going to throw Kristaps out there because so-and-so's going to try to get to the rim. And then there may be times where I think that'll be an exception. But when you have a team that you got like a Cade, where you want to run a second big defender kind of at him when there's 4 on the clock to go and force him to get the ball up, that's where Kristaps might be valuable there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Quinn swings those late possession defensive lineups. They have way more firepower and configurability than they had at any point last year in that way.
All right, Glenn, I want to go to the offense because there's a lot to talk about with Dyson. And it may not seem that way. He isn't a star on offense the way he's on defense. That goes without saying. But, I mean, just a couple of broad things to begin this conversation about the offense. Like, I like EPM as a catch-all advanced metric. It's a good one. They basically had Dyson as a league average offensive player. And that may not sound like much, but that's not bad. When you're an elite defender, being an average offensive player is pretty good. Raptor had to be even better than that. And by the way, Raptor, which used to be 538's metric, now Neil Payne kind of manages it. Raptor, as a spoiler alert, had Dyson as the 11th best player in the league last year overall. And it's because they had him as a pretty good offensive player, in addition to being an awesome defender. And the Hawks actually put this stat out after he won Most Improved Player, but it's a box score numbers thing, but it's also notable to me. Dyson was only the 3rd player since 1974 to improve by at least 8 points, 2 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game, 1 year to the next. Obviously, the steals we talked about that already. But Dyson upped his offensive production quite a lot. And not just in per minute. Like, per minute numbers were also way better. It wasn't just the jump in minutes. Like, that helped, of course. But he was legitimately pretty effective on offense. There's some weaknesses, too, that we'll talk about. But I don't know if you encounter this. I think, broadly speaking, and this is, again, broad on purpose, I think Dyson's an underrated offensive player at this point because it's not conventional. Like, Dyson's shooting is a question mark that we'll talk about. It doesn't look the best. It doesn't always go in. Free throw shooting is a question. But I think people have almost forgotten that he came up as like a real prospect on offense, like as a point guard. He isn't really a traditional point guard, but he played there last year. He'll probably play there again. There's a real skill set there. And when he was asked to ramp it up last year, he had a lot of 20-point games. Like, he had the one everybody remembers is the one without Trey, where I think he had 28 in a big win. Like, he's not going to do it all the time, but am I crazy? I think Dyson is an undervalued offensive player at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy like I said in the very beginning, for a guy who was playing on the ball for the first time in his NBA career, the results were pretty astonishing, right? Now, when we get through kind of what he does well, I want to talk about how he needs to expand his offensive game. We'll get to that, right?
Oh, yeah.
But his ability to get downhill, his ability to have leverage as a ball handler, to know when to create leverage as a ball handler, to get by the man in front of him, get to the paint, get to his floater. And then he learned, not that far into last season, that when a second defender would come cut that floater away, he would get to that little spin move he has that's really reliable as well, right? And for me, it's like I watched that all season long, and I'm like, when are teams going to be like, these are basically the two things he goes to all the time, and to figure out a way to stop that, right? And it didn't really happen. The best defenses kind of did, right? You go and put, Houston has a plan for everything, right? Even though they're defensive personnel, or like just going to put, Amen Thompson on you, and deal with that, or whatever it might be. But for me, I kept saying all last year that he's basically doing 2 to 3 things really well, right? It's getting to the floater, great touch. He has great balance getting into that shot, tremendous balance on that shot. And then that spin move he's really confident as well. The passing I thought was up and down at times, right? When it was a cutter with one defender on the backside of the play, he'd hit that all the time. In the area of the passing game where he was a little bit off sometimes, just reading where that second defender might jump behind the play or jump a passing lane or impact a passing lane. But I don't hold that against him because, like I said, he never played point guard in the NBA in his life before last year. And so there are other parts of his game that still need to evolve and to broaden in those things. But, on 18 on 29, you hear me say all the time, smart players try to do the things they're good at and try to not do the things they're not good at. And that's what Dyson did on offense last year. And then felt like the last 2 months of the season, the 3-point shooting did start to come around, right? I still think I still have a hard time knowing, is that stabilized or, what's it going to be? What's my expectation this year? But the thing that you love, we talk about all the time, is like, if you're open, take the shot. If you're open, take the shot. And what I love about him is like, he's just mentally just so level-headed that it's like, okay, I missed my last 2, but in our offense, when you're open, you take the shot. So I take that shot. I think you love that about him. But for me, it was like that he leaned into, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. I'm going to do all those things. And if a defense takes it away from me, now the next season, the next growth is, okay, he was a starter all of last year, right? As a defensive player, he's like all-star level on that end, clear, not clear as it can be. On offense, it's going to be interesting to see, do defenses come out this season saying, we're not going to let you get to that floater. We're not going to let you get to that little turnaround spin shot. We're going to make you do something else. It's going to be interesting to see if he's added something this summer that will give him, okay, I can't get to that, I'm going to get to this. I can't get to that, I'm going to get to this. That's the thing I'm really eager to see come October in the preseason games, is has he grown and broadened his offensive skill set so that it's more than just 2 or 3 things this year, if that makes sense.
All right, that is all for part 1 of a 2-part chat with myself and Glen Willis. Part 2 should be available in the same podcast feed right now, so go ahead and listen to that one if you'd please. I appreciate you being here as always. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. We'll be back later on this week. And again, one more time, part 2 available right now. We'll see you all next time.